Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. First live stream of 2023, first live stream of the new year. And I hope if you're watching, you are having a great 2023 so far. We're going to go over why I think 2023 is going to be a great year for stacking silver and for all of us silver stackers. Say hello in the chat if you're on. Let's wake this algorithm up also. If you're on, please do give the video a big thumbs up. Let's give people a few minutes to hop in here. Give that thumbs up. That lets people know, lets the algorithm know to start sending this out. So please do that if you are watching. And we're taking a look here at the chart of the GDX. That's an ETF that tracks some of the large gold miners and silver miners too, because a lot of those gold miners produce silver as a byproduct. Hello, Soldier of the Cross. All right. Glad to have a few of you chiming in the chat there. Hey, Jamie Rocket. So before we really dig into things, I am just going to give it a few minutes for a few people to hop on here. So let me know what you think about the market action that we've had so far in 2023. I mean, we've got a trading day under our belt now. Say hi in the chat. Let us know what you think about what's going on with the metals. And in just a moment, we will be getting into some of the gold and silver news, some of what's going on in the markets. And it's been a few days since I put out a video. You know, we had the New Year holiday and all that. And so there's a few other things I want to cover as well. Some things in the news, some current events. What's up, Jody Barber, Stephen Sproul, My Alden? Thanks for hopping in, everybody. Greetings from Canada, from Nevin Hayter. Hi, Nevin. Hope everybody up in Canada made it through the chilly weather this December okay. Hope everybody's having a good New Year so far. Okay, so I think we've probably got enough people on to really start digging into things. So you can see here, this is the chart of the GDX, the VanEck Gold Miners ETF, and up 3.49% today. Today, January 3rd, the first trading day of 2023. And that's pretty significant, I think, when you look at what happened to all the other major stock indexes here. So everything started off the day in the green, but they gave up those gains very quickly and were in the red for the entire trading session, and they finished up. Now, it's not like they had major losses, but the fact that all of the major stock indexes were in the red and the GDX is up nearly 3.5%, I think is a very good portent for the year we're going to have in gold and silver. And let's get to the actual metals prices themselves. We've got the one-day chart here over at SD Bullion, and you can see that we're in the green today, 24.20. So that's a pretty good price for silver, especially like I mentioned with all of the major stock indexes selling off. You can see silver did start the day off considerably higher than it finished up. Overnight, silver and gold both had a pretty nice little spike up. Now, they did give up some of those gains, but they both finished the day in the green, and that's pretty solid performance for the first day, especially when you consider that in light of how both of the metals did in 2022. Both of the metals were some of the best performing assets last year. Silver finishing in the green and gold pretty much finishing flat on the year. But that's tremendous performance because that's a lot better than you can say for any of the major stock indexes. It's a lot better than you can say for Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin, I believe, was down over 60% in 2022, whereas silver was up something like 3.5%. So when silver outperforms pretty much every other asset, you know it's time to start paying attention to it. And even though we did have a pretty nice finish to the year of 2022 in the price of silver, recovered nicely off the lows from September, still, I believe there's a lot of room for these markets to move up. And gold price also having a nice move up today, up about 1%, close to that 1850 level. Now, I think if we close above 1850, we may start to see some real action here in the price of gold. It's going to depend on some of these things that we get over the next couple of weeks. We'll get the inflation numbers for December. Depends on what we hear from the Fed, but I do think that we are going to see some higher prices in gold and silver. Of course, anything can happen in the short term. Henry Bowman says SD has a sale on Sate Godin's replicas. Yeah, we're going to get into some of the sales over at SD in just a little bit because I have a question for all of you. I want to know what you think is the best deal between a couple of different products. But let's get into some of the news that we've had so far this year. How is the year starting off? What's the kind of tone we're going to get set this year? Well, there was this story yesterday, reported in Reuters. A massive barracks was struck with HIMARS missiles in the Donetsk region of Ukraine. And the Russians are reporting that 63 soldiers were killed. There's a lot of disparate reports on this, though. I've heard up to 600 soldiers may have been casualties in this event. And, this is not a good way to start the new year in terms of geopolitics. I believe that what we're going to see here is a ratcheting up of geopolitical tensions in 2023, and the year is certainly off to not a good start in terms of that. And of course, all of that means more deglobalization, more breakdown of global supply chains, and there's a real possibility that, in this global conflict that we see brewing, China could get drawn into it. And if that happens, that is going to have some really drastic effects on the global economy and also on the economy here in the U.S. And I don't want to dwell too much on these kind of dark and unpleasant stories, but I think it's important to pay attention to them. And this is a real strong escalation here because this is a strike conducted with a weapon provided by the U.S., these HIMARS long-range rockets, which caused a significant number of casualties here. Whether you're listening to the Russian numbers or the Ukrainian reported numbers, I think the important thing to note here is that these are high casualties. They're inflicted with weapons provided by the U.S. And so this is just us getting one step closer to getting drawn into this conflict. Now, I've got some people in the comments commenting on this. Pray that World War III doesn't start. Yeah, Jamie Rocket, I certainly do hope that we do not see World War III, but the risk of such an event appears to be growing. And I'm not trying to be a fearmonger here or anything, but I do think it's important to prepare yourself for what that might mean for the economy, also just for the situation here in the U.S. and what it might mean for our daily lives, because it's likely not to be good. Now, moving on to some also gloomy, but perhaps not quite so ominous news. This is a chart that Wall Street Silver posted. It is a inflation infographic from what happened in 2022. And by the way, while we're on this topic, Wall Street Silver is a great community. I'm a big fan. I mean, I'm active over on their Reddit. I try to interact with them on Twitter here as much as possible too. And their Twitter account has really blown up. They have gone to 600,000 followers. Notably, Elon Musk is now following Wall Street Silver, and I think he follows something like 168, 170 accounts, something like that. And he interacts with the Wall Street Silver account pretty regularly. So that is fascinating. I mean, if you remember back in 2021, I think it was Elon Musk posted that tweet about Bitcoin. I think all he did was he tweeted Bitcoin with a Bitcoin emoji or something along those lines, and it caused a big spike up in the price of Bitcoin. So obviously this is not guaranteed to happen or anything, but it's kind of an interesting speculative thing. If he starts getting on the silver stacker train, that could mean some significant movement in the price of precious metals in a very short period of time. And, I've seen Elon interact with Wall Street Silver, and every time he does that, that gives a tremendous number of impressions to the silver stacking movement. So I think that this might be the year that we really start to see a widespread awakening regarding precious metals and their role as monetary metals and what they have to do with the inflation that we're experiencing. And on that note, this inflation infographic that they posted over there is pretty interesting. Now, he noted in the post that, this is based on the CPI, so likely the actual inflation is significantly worse than this. But if you look here, food at elementary and secondary schools, 254% increase. I mean, that's insane. And it illustrates nicely how regressive a tax inflation is, because inflation is essentially a tax. It's what finances all of the government spending that isn't paid for via taxation, and it gets disproportionately put on the most vulnerable members of society because, if you're talking about school lunches at elementary schools and secondary schools, that price going up, I mean, that is something that disproportionately disadvantages low-income households significantly. And then moving on, I mean, we got fuel oil up 65.7%. So if you're trying to stay warm in the Arctic blast that we just got in December, that was a lot more expensive this year than in previous years. Eggs up 49%. We're going to talk a little bit more about that too. Like I said, there's been a lot that's happened over the past couple days. A lot of things, some housekeeping, just some stories I want to get into cover. I don't necessarily want to make a whole video about them, but a live stream is a good format for that. And if there's anything you'd like me to cover, put it in the comments there. Anything you want me to comment on, or you got any questions about any of these stories I'm covering. I like to interact with folks in the chat section of these live streams. So what else do we see? 36% increase in airline fares, 34% increase in butter and margarine. I mean, I'm not going to go through the whole list, but you get the idea. Smartphones declining in price. So at least we can all play, Candy Crush while we starve and go bankrupt from our grocery bills. I'm sure that the World Economic Forum really likes that idea. So anyway, that was another interesting story. Now, getting a little bit more into this egg thing, I do just want to comment on this, that there's this avian flu thing going around, which is significantly impacting the supply of eggs. And we really have kind of a perfect storm when you think about it in terms of inflation here, because on the one hand, you have the supply being impacted, and that, of course, will lead to higher prices, but also you've got the supply of currency being expanded. I mean, the government fiscal policy continuing to borrow and spend all this money into the economy is going to lead to continued inflation. So you got more dollars chasing fewer goods, and we're going to see this across the board for a number of products, I believe, in 2023. This egg thing is just the beginning. And if you've been to the store lately, the price of eggs really is getting crazy. I went shopping just a couple days ago, and I don't eat a ton of eggs, but I do eat them occasionally, and I hadn't really looked at them in a while. But the lowest cost store brand eggs were, I think, $6.99 for a dozen eggs, which is crazy. The free range stuff was also seeing inflation. I think the free range for a dozen was something like $8, but honestly, I mean, the price difference used to be very big between the free range, kind of organic, expensive eggs, the farms where the chickens have a name and get to play with their friends and all that stuff. Those eggs are usually significantly more expensive. But now, I mean, you might as well get the organic free range stuff because it's only a couple bucks more. I mean, the regular eggs are tremendously expensive. And food inflation, again, is another illustration of how this inflation problem is like a regressive form of taxation, because, the super rich, they don't care about food inflation. What percent, if you make $1 million a year, and not saying you're super rich if you make $1 million a year, but let's say you're in the class that earns $1 million a year, what percentage of your bills goes towards food? I mean, it's not much, but if you're in the lowest rung of society in terms of socioeconomic status, a significant portion of your income goes towards your grocery bill and just feeding yourself. And when you start making it difficult for people to feed themselves through food inflation, that's a real problem, because that's when you start to see things like social unrest. So I think that's something we all need to be worried about here as well. Jamie Rocket says, smart egg stacker. Yeah, maybe eggs were one of the better investments of 2022. I don't know what the shelf life of an egg in a refrigerator is, but I guess if you loaded up your fridge at the beginning of 2022, you probably saved a lot of money if you eat a lot of eggs. What else we got a lot of folks commenting here. What else we got? Yeah, people don't like digital stuff. Stimulus checks got us too. Yeah, stimulus checks. We're probably going to see more stimulus checks. I saw a poll recently that said 63% of Americans support the idea of further stimulus checks to help ease the inflation pressure, which, I mean, that just shows you how little understanding there is of inflation. I think it was Jerome Powell who said, now we understand how little we know about inflation. And if central bankers don't understand inflation, it's their job to understand that. Just imagine how little the average person on the street really gets it. I mean, I don't know, maybe they buy the line that it's Putin's price hike. But, of course, central bankers do understand inflation. They know, but, they like to inflate the currency. That's their MO. That's their number one tool, right? Just printing money. Anyway, so moving on here, we can move on to the famous U.S. debt clock. Now, I look at this a lot, but I do think it's important to note that we've seen a big jump in the U.S. federal budget deficit, $1.4 trillion now, and I suspect that we're going to see that number jump significantly here in 2023. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a $2 trillion deficit, which is really incredible when you think about it. I mentioned in a video recently, it took something like 205 years for the U.S. government to rack up its first $1 trillion in debt. And now we're racking up more than $1 trillion each and every year. And we're up to $31.4 trillion. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we see that hit 34 this year, or even more possibly. I mean, who knows? It seems like the more spending that the government can create, the better they think the inflation problem is going to get. Of course, the opposite is true. But this is going to become an even bigger problem than it has been. And the U.S. debt, the rate at which it's growing, it looks like it's becoming sort of an exponential thing. So I do believe that we may reach some kind of a critical mass, maybe not in 2023, but soon, and we're going to see the nascent form of that this year. Buy small amounts, whatever you can afford. Tony Neville says, yeah, well, I'm not a financial advisor, but that's what I'm doing, and I just bought a kilo bar of silver from SD Bullion. Here, I made a short video of the unboxing, but if you guys want to see that, we can watch it here. I don't even know if you can hear the music with the way I'm doing this live stream, but it's got some nice calm music there to enjoy this unboxing video too. And I just thought that this might be a fun way to do the unboxing rather than trying to incorporate it into a longer video. Just make a short. Kind of been experimenting with shorts lately. And yeah, that was my most recent purchase. Just arrived today, so very happy to get some more physical bullion in the stack, given the fact that the national debt is climbing so rapidly. Now, I'm not the only one with that idea, of course. Gold surging to a 6-month high earlier today. This was published in CNBC, and can hear the music. Okay, good. I'm glad you got to hear the relaxing music there with that unboxing. I don't know. You got to experiment with different things on YouTube, see what people like. Gold surging to a 6-month high. And of course, this is a trend that we've seen building towards the end of 2022. The dollar index starting to weaken. We had central banks around the world loading up on gold in 2022. The Bank of China announced some kind of a small addition to their official gold holdings. I think 38 tons is what they announced, but I saw there was an interview with the CEO of Barrick Gold, and he said that based on what he saw, there was an increase in their gold holdings of something like 200 tons. That was his estimate. So, China likely has a lot more gold than they let on, and I think that we're going to see a continued accumulation of gold by sovereign countries in 2023, and I think we're going to see the price continue to move up. Again, anything can happen in the short term, of course, but the trend is certainly up. And one important thing to take away from silver and gold's performance in 2022 was that silver actually outperformed gold. So it finished the year something like 3.5%, I think, in the green for 2022, whereas gold was pretty much flat. And when you see silver outperforming gold, that is an indication that you are in a precious metals bull market, because silver is a smaller market than gold. It moves faster and it's more volatile. So, it tends to outperform gold when they're both moving to the upside, and then it underperforms gold when they're moving to the downside. It drops faster than gold. And so the fact that silver finished up outperforming gold is a very good sign for 2023. There was one thing I wanted to read to you from this article here, and that was, this line from Ole Hansen. I think I'm saying that right. I'm not sure. His name's O-L-E, Ole. Anyway, this is what he had to say about the spike up in the price of gold. He said, in general, we are looking for a price-friendly 2023 supported by recession and stock market valuation risks, an eventual peak in central bank rates combined with the prospect of a weaker dollar and inflation not returning to the expected sub-3% level by year end, all adding support. And then he said, in addition, the de-dollarization seen by several central banks last year when a record amount of gold was bought looks set to continue, thereby providing a soft floor under the market. So if we do get a drop down in the price of gold, it is likely to have a floor under it and be mitigated to some extent by all this purchasing by central banks around the world. Now, it's only day 3 of 2023. We've got one trading session under our belt, so it's just a forecast at this point, but I do think central banks are going to continue loading up on gold. There's no change in all of the fundamental reasons that they have been getting into hard assets. The de-dollarization thing persists. Russia, there was an article that Russia just removed the dollar and the pound sterling entirely from, I think it's called their National Well-Being Fund, and they added more gold and more Chinese yuan. So all of that sort of thing is going to put some upward pressure on the price of gold. And now we kind of see the dollar, as the Fed has slowed down the pace of their rate hikes, the dollar is losing some strength as well. And that is contributing to this upward movement in the price of gold and silver. And I think that's going to continue. This is a chart I wanted to look at as well. This is the price of platinum. So we can take a look at the 6-month chart. And you can see that it's been on a pretty good run since the lows at the beginning of September. It was down to $800, now almost at $1,100. In fact, it did go over $1,100 today. And if we look at the 5-day chart, I mean, you can see even in the very short term, had a really nice spike up in the price of platinum at the end of trading in 2022. On Thursday, December 29th, it was down around $1,014, and then today at the high it was up around $1,105. So that's a big move up in just a few days trading. And platinum is something I think that is very interesting because it's not really a monetary metal. It doesn't have the monetary tradition that gold and silver have, but that has a lot to do with the fact that it just wasn't being refined for thousands of years like they were. I mean, I think it first was refined in large quantities sometime in like the 18th century. So the reason platinum doesn't have that history is just because it's not around. But the platinum market is a really small market. I talk about how silver is smaller than gold, and it is, but platinum is even smaller than that. I mean, the amount held on the COMEX is trivial compared to the number of ounces of gold and silver. And so the possibility for a squeeze in the price of platinum, I think, is maybe the only place where there's a stronger likelihood of that than in the silver market, because silver also is ripe for a squeeze, I think, because of the large amount of paper that is traded, the potential shortfalls of silver, physical silver bullion compared to the amount of paper. But in platinum, it's like a whole other world. I mean, there's so little actual physical metal. And that kind of brings me to this page. This is the 2023 New Year's sale over at SD Bullion. And they've got a few things I've been kind of eyeballing. They've got these Sunshine Silver Walking Liberty rounds. I think that's what someone in the chat was referencing there a moment ago. But they also have some Scottsdale stackable silver bars, which I like those. I feature those in a few of the videos. And okay, I've got a quick question here in the chat. Let me get to it. He says, "Hey man, you're one of my favorite stacking channels. Quick question. What are your thoughts on the potential for confiscation of precious metals?" Okay, let me finish up on this topic just real quick, and then I will get to that D small. So 2022 1-ounce platinum Britannias. This is the thing I'm really eyeballing the most. $59.99 any quantity over spot. If you look at this price, it's pretty good compared to even like generic 1-ounce platinum bars. And there's also the added benefit that this may be the last year that these are minted with the Queen's face. Now, I don't know how the 2023 Platinum Britannias are going to be. I don't know if they're going to have the Queen or if they're going to have King Charles or whatever on there. But it just seems like this is a really nice coin. I own 1 ounce of platinum. I own a 1-ounce platinum eagle. And I don't know. I'm kind of thinking of doubling my position. What do you think? Leave me a comment in the chat there to let me know what your thoughts are on these Platinum Britannias. Now, to D Small's question, the potential for confiscation of precious metals. Well, platinum probably has a lot going for it in that respect as well, because if, let's say gold and silver get confiscated, I guess platinum might too, but it seems like platinum might slip under the radar there, just being kind of an obscure thing. So that's potentially, I guess, a benefit of owning some physical platinum. But also, I mean, I don't know. I guess it's possible, right? And if you've been buying gold and silver the way I do, I don't pay cash for all my gold and silver. I mean, I have some, obviously, from local coin shops. But I think that a confiscation of actual physical metal would be extremely difficult to pull off. I mean, there would have to be some strange way to get people to turn it in themselves, like, turn it in for a CBDC, and that's the only way you can buy food or something. It's always possible, I guess, but, your bank account can get confiscated too. And the thing about precious metals is that they are going to be a lot harder to confiscate than bank accounts. And I mean, that's the reason that we have things like the Second Amendment. And that's obviously not a call towards any kind of violence or action like that or anything. But I'm just saying that just stealing the wealth from the American people, I don't think it's too likely that anybody would attempt that or, try to pull that off. Now, maybe if we get like hyperinflation or something, it's possible, I suppose, that there could be confiscation of physical metals. But that's also the kind of scenario where people would want to cling on to them. And it happened once before, I guess back in the 30s. It was Roosevelt signed that executive order that people had to turn in their gold coins. I don't think silver was ever confiscated, but also, I don't know how many people actually turned in their gold. I think only one or two people were ever prosecuted using that executive order, and it was kind of on the honor system. And I mean, my thoughts are if you turned in your gold as part of that confiscation, you were a sucker back in the 30s, because of course, immediately after all that gold was confiscated, they just revalued the gold from like $20 to $35. So they robbed everybody who actually turned in their gold. But I don't think they were ever sending folks around door to door looking for metals, nothing like that. I don't think it's a real risk. It is one reason you might not want to keep your precious metals in a safety deposit box in a bank, because if they're there, they're vulnerable to confiscation, but if you are keeping them either with private storage like Brinks or something along those lines, you probably would have an opportunity to get delivery of your metal. If you're storing it yourself in some kind of a secure location, then I don't think it's a big risk. I mean, who knows? It could happen, right? And there's probably some forms of bullion that are more potentially resistant to a confiscation than others. Like maybe legal tender coinage might be exempt. Maybe not. I don't know. But it's not something I really spend too much time worrying about. And besides, you might just lose all your gold and silver in a boating accident or something anyway. And then, good luck. I guess you can just write it off as a loss if that happens. Anyway, that's just my thoughts. The only rights you have are the ones you exercise and defend, says Henry Bowman. And yeah, I would agree with that. That sounds like an accurate statement to me. In the long run, the U.S. gets screwed big time for a little stimulus money. Well, it wasn't a little stimulus money. First of all, it's a lot of stimulus money that went out. And yeah, only a small amount of all that, money that was printed went to the American people, of course. Most of it went to bail out zombie corporations and that sort of thing. And, went to plutocratic government cronies. And, that's the problem with big government is, it's not an efficient way to allocate resources. There's tons of pork. It's basically special interests stealing all of the tax dollars from the American people. And yeah, that's what all of this inflation is about, right? It's a huge wealth transfer. Yeah, Auntie Fiat said huge wealth transfer in the chat there right as I was about to say it. And that's exactly right. This is a wealth transferred. If you don't want your wealth to be transferred, I think physical precious metals are a safer place to keep assets than in your bank account, because in terms of confiscation, the bail-ins, we're probably going to see bail-ins. Let's just put it that way. Last time in 2008, when the financial sector was threatened, we got bailouts. So the government created a bunch of money, and that still is on the taxpayer because you pay for all of that via, inflation, because it's money that the government doesn't have, and they're just printing the money. But we may see bail-ins in our lifetimes, and that's where the bank just confiscates your bank account or part of your bank account in order to make itself whole. And I would not be surprised at all, given the nature of the kind of plutocratic system we have, where the banks and financiers are in league with the people, passing the laws, that that could very well happen. And so you might wake up one day and you might still have your gold and your silver, but you might find that your bank account is frozen or it's been cut in half or what have you. And I know a lot of people talk about the FDIC and how that protects your bank accounts. The thing about the FDIC, nobody mentioned it specifically today, but I just know anytime I mention bank accounts, people tend to chime in with the FDIC thing. You got to realize this about the FDIC insurance. There's no coffer of money. There's no giant bank account that the FDIC has to make these bank accounts whole. So if a bank fails or something and the FDIC has to kick in, all of the money that the FDIC capitalizes these banks with is going to be printed. So yeah, you might get your money out of your bank account, but it might have been devalued significantly between the time that you deposited and when you receive it. So just keep in mind that the FDIC is no real guarantee of anything, because if the FDIC is forced to kick in, it's going to be like Alan Greenspan said, we can guarantee cash payments in any amount, but we cannot guarantee their purchasing power, and that is something to keep in mind. Anyway, I want to wrap up this video by taking a look at some charts here. This is a chart of gold, and it's a long-term chart going back to 2011. There is a cup and handle formation here, which is very interesting, I think. And you can see the handle here kind of formed this downward channel, and I think I drew this chart a while ago, so the price action is just kind of playing out. But very interesting to see how we got that spike up in gold last year. It dropped right back down to this trend line and bounced so nicely off of it. And I think that if we can clear the top of this cup and handle formation, which is at about gold's all-time high here, let's say we close above $2,100 sometime in 2023, well, it's going to be off to the races, and this chart is going to complete, and we could see the price of gold hit $3,000 very easily once that price is penetrated with any kind of volume and any kind of strong movement. Also, I want to take a look at the chart of silver here. This is a very long-term chart, so this goes back to the spike up in 1980, but you can see there's also on this extremely long-term chart a nice cup and handle formation forming here as well. And very notably, silver has come right up to this trend line here, and if we break through that in silver, which, I mean, given today's price action, it's looking like that's certainly possible. I mean, maybe when we get the inflation data for December, I think we get that on January 12th, we might see some significant movement in the precious metals. Now, I'm not too much into timing markets or forecasting things, but one thing I will say is if we get a softer than expected inflation number for December, so if inflation comes in lower than analysts are expecting it, we could see a really big move up in the price of precious metals, because that will be signaling to the markets that the Fed is closer to pivoting and returning to an easier monetary policy. So I do think that the stage has been set here for some significant moves up in 2023 for us silver stackers, and the prices that we have today, even though we have had a pretty significant move up from the September lows, I mean, I think silver's up about 30 to 40% from those lows. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. Well, I guess I actually do. I'm looking at a chart of silver, but this is a long-term chart, so I'm not going to twiddle around with it to try to get exact numbers. But the point is, silver is still really cheap, even though we've seen a big move up so far. I mean, keep in mind that if you go back to that 1980 high in silver and you adjust for inflation, that all-time high in silver is something like $170 in today's dollars. So we could see some really big moves up in silver. I mean, silver is multiples below its inflation-adjusted all-time high. And there's very few other assets that you can say that about. So that's why I'm still stacking. I just picked up that kilo silver bar. Might be doing some platinum now for my next addition to the stack. And if you guys want, I can go to the chat here before we wrap up this live stream. And I should read back through this because as I've been talking, I know I've missed some good comments here, but I'm paying attention to the chat now. So if you have a question or anything you want to cover before I wrap this up, go ahead and put it in the chat now, because I'm trying to read through those, go back and take a look and see if there was anything that I missed notable. I always like live streams because they allow me to communicate with you guys in real time. It's Paradise has put a list in the chat there of SIL. I think that is a ETF. SILJ, that's another ETF. So those are ETFs that track silver miners. And yeah, I do think that the price of silver is going to move up significantly in 2023, but the real movement will likely be in the gold and silver mining stocks. And I don't talk about that too much on the channel. I think I might get more into that in the near future, but gold and silver mining stocks are like leveraged exposure to the price of the metals. Now, I do own several gold and silver mining stocks. I view it as a lot more speculative than the actual physical metal. I mean, the metal is like a savings account for me, just saving in real money. I don't want to save in paper that gets constantly devalued. So stacking gold and silver is a way of saving, but investing in gold and silver mining stocks, I believe, will be one of the most lucrative plays when we get the big move up in the precious metals that I am expecting. And again, this is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just a guy on YouTube. But I'm just sharing with you my thoughts and how I've positioned myself. And I think that gold and silver paper assets, not like futures contracts, but like real shares of real companies that have gold and silver in the ground and that produce the metal, those companies' profits, when gold and silver are higher and they can sell the metal for a higher price, their profits are going to go through the roof. Let's see, what else we got here in the chat. How do you calculate the inflation into the spot price? Well, you just take an inflation calculator and you plug in the old spot price and you plug in the year, and there's different inflation calculators. The $170 is what you get if you use the CPI data, which, that probably understates it doesn't understate inflation significantly. So, the all-time inflation adjusted high for silver is actually probably somewhere higher than 170. It's just hard to know what data set to use. You can use, Shadow Stats inflation calculator if you want, and depending on which one of those you use, you get prices of silver north of $1,000, and coincidentally, that's also what you get if you compare the Dow to silver ratio from that time period to today. So, 170, I think, is a conservative price target for silver, personally. And I do think that there's going to come a time when we're seeing higher prices even than that, very likely. Does it matter if you unsealed your silver rounds tube? No, not if they're generic rounds. Silver is silver. When you go to sell them, if you have some that are kind of, dinged up or whatever, and you have some that are in brilliant uncirculated shape, maybe a buyer might prefer those. But at the end of the day, rounds are rounds. Silver is silver. I definitely wouldn't worry about unsealing your silver rounds tube. I unseal most of mine just to take a look at the silver. Maybe if you're stacking like semi-numismatic coins or something along those lines, something with a higher premium, you might not want to do that. But for generic rounds, definitely not a problem. A good silver coin set to try and collect is the Tudor Beast set from England, as it will be a highly collectible set, as it will have two different monarchs on the obverse. Oh, good tip from I Only Harley. So maybe if I find a good deal on one of those Tudor Beast sets, then I will snap that up. That's a good tip. Thanks, I Only Harley. Appreciate that. Jay Hart says, I am even buying a tube of copper every time. Okay, Jay Hart, I would issue, and to everybody listening, just a quick warning. If you're buying copper rounds, you're probably paying way too much for them. I would not recommend buying copper rounds or copper bullion bars or any of that stuff. If you want to get copper, the best way to get copper, and I've done several videos on this, you can go back on the channel and just type in copper in the search bar, and you'll find that in my videos. Best way to get copper bullion, just go buy $100 boxes of US nickels. Nickels are composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel, and if you take a look at the melt value of a nickel coin, it's actually higher than the face value. So you're buying something like $120 worth of copper and nickel bullion when you pay $100 to buy a box of nickel. So I would stay away from copper rounds and copper bars, unless you just want them for fun. But in terms of getting a return on your purchase, definitely U.S. nickels, maybe not as exciting, maybe not as fun, but hey, if you're ever really bored, you can sort through your nickels and look for war nickels or something, I guess, do some coin roll hunting. But yeah, as far as copper bullion goes, the markups on 1 ounce rounds, you're never going to get your money back. Maybe if you sell them as a collectible or something, but definitely not for the just copper content. Okay, what else we got? Billy Bob 369 says, I'm a millennial and straight up refuse to invest in stocks, crypto, and physical for me. I would like some mining stocks, but only via crypto. Okay, I don't know what that means. I crypto at this point, I do actually own some Bitcoin. I just have it sitting in a wallet and I ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist. And maybe someday if Bitcoin spikes up another speculative mania or something, I'll sell it. But I don't do anything with crypto. I don't think it's anywhere even in the same class as bullion. It's a speculative tech investment, so it's not digital gold, I'll say that much. Can you tell us what mining stocks you were investing in? I don't have a full roster in front of me off the top of my head. I own some Newmont gold, some Barrick gold, some First Majestic silver. Now, keep in mind, none of this is a recommendation. I'm just telling you what I'm investing. I'm not telling you to go buy these stocks. I'm not telling you to buy any stocks. Always do your own due diligence, but those are some of the things I'm invested in. Some of the juniors as well, but those are a lot more speculative. You got to do your own research on those. But yeah, just blue chip mining stocks I think are good. Some of the more speculative ones I'm invested in are Sibanye Stillwater. That's a South African one that throws off a nice dividend. Anyway, there's a lot of good mining stocks out there. Just do your research. It's a nice way to get some yield on your precious metals investment. A lot of mining stocks pay a dividend because they're making a real product and they're earning real money. So unlike gold or silver, which just kind of sit there and appreciate due to inflation, the mining stocks actually throw off a dividend. Okay, I get copper from HVAC units I tear out and left over from swap outs. Open your mind says, that's awesome. Yes, scrapping copper, obviously, that's the best way to get it. I like wood nickels. Never seen a wood nickel. What do you look for in a good mining stock? I mean, that's kind of more than I'm going to get into in today's video. You got to look at a lot of things. You got to look at the management. You got to look at their track record of earnings. You got to look at the level of debt they're carrying. You got to look at the actual jurisdictions that they operate in, because there's a lot of risks with mining stocks that don't exist for physical bullion. There's human beings that work at the company. There's a risk of nationalization by the local jurisdictions and unfriendly environmental regulations. There's a lot of things you want to look at. But again, today, I mean, I could probably do a whole video on that. So I'm not going to go too deeply into that, but just many factors. Let's say that. Corporate holders. Yeah, they're like Soldier of the Cross Music says corporate holders. Yeah, there's a lot of important things to look at for stocks. And I'm not a stock investing expert by any means, but I do, I stay away from stocks by and large. There's a few also consumer essential stocks that I own shares in, but miners, I think, are where it's at, and they make up a disproportionate portion of my portfolio. Probably more than a financial advisor these days would recommend, but I don't put much stake in them either. I think that the best thing to do is to educate yourself and do your own research, and serious research too, like actually get a prospectus for the company and read through it. That's always a good idea. Hi, would be great to have a forum for stackers to trade collectible silver bars, since we all have different stuff. Don't know how that could work. I think there's PMs for sale. There's a few Reddit communities. All right, well, thanks for watching, everybody. I do appreciate you tuning in. I'm kind of droning on here, and I know I could probably sit here and communicate with people in the chat all day. John Byer says pre-1982 pennies. Yep, those are awesome too. You just got to sort them out. That's why I like nickels, because you can just buy boxes of them and stack them up. But thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're all having a great, happy new year. I hope you all had a good new year. I hope you are enjoying 2023 so far. I hope it's been a good year for you so far. Hope it continues to be. I really appreciate everybody who tunes in, watches the videos. Please do like the video. If you're not subscribed yet, consider subscribing to the channel. And stick around, everybody, for 2023, because there are going to be a lot more great videos. I think there's going to be a lot of very interesting developments in the world of precious metals to cover. So that's it for today, folks. Thanks for watching. Smart Silver Stacker, out.